In December of 1965, Bob Dylan sat down for this press conference with KQED in San Francisco. When asked if words were more important than the music, he said,
"The words are just as important as the music. There would be no music without the words."
That same year, Ben Carruthers set the poem on the back of the Another Side of Bob Dylan LP, a Dylanification of blues tune Jack O'Diamond's, to music. 13 months after Jack O'Diamond's release, in July of 1966, Dylan got in that mysterious motorcycle accident. Whatever happened that day, he saw the opportunity to retreat from the public eye, settling in Woodstock, New York with his wife and children. His touring band, The Hawks, followed him out there, renting a house in nearby Saugerties. They nicknamed the Big Pink House, well, Big Pink. Wouldn't you know it? While Dylan had the most fruitful songwriting period of his entire career, Garth Hudson set up a makeshift studio in Big Pink's basement. There, Dylan and the Hawks, now the band, workshopped a loose collection of about 100 songs. Well, we thought there were 100 songs. In 2013, after a bootleg, 2 studio albums, and 47 years of Basement Tapes mythology, Bob's publisher found a box of 40 more sets of lyrics in various stages of completion, or incompletion. This reads like the plot of a movie, but I swear to God it's true. This is the story of Bob Dylan's lost songs, and the band that finally recorded them. Hi, I'm Abby, I have a lot of records, and welcome to year 3 of Modern Classics Month. How are we? Are we doing okay? It's been a long year. May is the most experimental month on my channel, where I turned the formula of my flagship series, Vinyl Monday, on its head. Instead of covering classic albums in my collection, I feature albums released within the last 25 years. It just so happens that part 1 of this year's Modern Classics Month has pretty direct ties to an album I literally just covered on Vinyl Monday, the band's Music from Big Pink. I figured there's no better time to keep the spirit of the Basement Tapes going. Your first installment of Modern Classics Month Year 3 is the new Basement Tapes, Lost on the River. Congrats to those who guessed this one. Remember, if you want to play along, all you gotta do is check out my post tab. That's where I post my hints to what the next album is gonna be. I make announcements, I host polls. You can find all of that on my channel, and if you so choose, you can always read the written versions of all my reviews, Monday and Friday videos, on my website, linked in the description. I also post short versions of this stuff on Instagram and TikTok, whatever. In the spirit of Vinyl Monday, let's take the plastic off. So what was the new Basement Tapes? Let's go back to that box of unfinished lyrics. Bob and his publisher handed them off to an old friend of his, T-Bone Burnett. If you'll remember from the Desire episode, T-Bone was an alum of Bob's Rolling Thunder Review group. To The Guardian, T-Bone said, quote, "The question to me was, would you like to do something with these? Shocked, I asked if Dylan was into this. Having been told he was, I asked no more questions. From there, he set out to assemble a supergroup to set Dylan's lyrics to music, record them, and release them as an LP. This wasn't the first project of this nature that Dylan was involved in. Of course, you have Tears of Rage and This Wheel's on Fire off the band's Music from Big Pink, and Dylan completed Hank Williams' The Love That Faded for the Notebooks of Hank Williams compilation. I've lost this game. Tomorrow has nothing but this is a little different. These musicians had the opportunity of a lifetime to collaborate with a 26 to 27-year-old Bob Dylan nearly 50 years after the fact. T-Bone's old friend and collaborator Elvis Costello said, quote, "You'd be a fool or an arrogant person if you don't say initially, of course it's daunting." Rhiannon Giddens of Grammy-winning folk group the Carolina Chocolate Drops said, "This is a special opportunity to sort of have all this time time with other creative people, and everybody's bringing a very specific and defined idea of what songwriting is to the table. Jim James of My Morning Jacket said, "It's so fun to see how different each of our songwriting styles are. It's like seeing the magician. How does the magician really pull the rabbit out of the hat?" About the process, Taylor Goldsmith of Dawes said, quote, "I never felt more creative and I never felt less comfortable." And when Marcus Mumford, yes, that Mumford, first arrived at the studio and sat for an interview, he simply said, and I quote, "I'm shit scared." All the members of the freshly minted New Basement tapes led their own groups, while also being able to play sideman and instrument swap as needed. They were what T-Bone called music archaeologists. In one way or another, they'd proven they could honor Dylan's spirit while bringing something new to the table. In the meantime, the group was sent lyrics for 16 songs to do as they pleased with. This strategy produced multiple renditions of the same song, some of which we hear on the album. About the process, Marcus said, quote, "When you start a band from scratch, you don't normally expect to have great songs immediately. We arrived and these songs were great, and so making them sound great was our challenge." The New Basement tapes recorded for 2 weeks at Capitol Studios in Hollywood. Ironically, the New Basement tapes recorded in one of the facility's basement spaces. And miraculously, just a couple days before sessions were set to begin, 8 more sets of lyrics were uncovered. All of these songs were worked out completely on the fly, no time for premeditated arranging. All the while, Bob himself had no idea what this music was supposed to be. Marcus said to the Associated Press, quote, "We aren't looking for any kind of blessing. It would be cool if he likes it, but in a way, he's like everybody else now. He'll hear it in the same light as everyone else." 15 songs made the cut for the standard edition of Lost on the River. 5 more were added to round out the double LP. This is the version I have. What makes Bob Dylan Bob Dylan? What's more important, the music or the lyrics? The New Basement tapes, the album, presents the very question Bob was presented with in that press conference all the way back in '65. The performance aspect is removed from Lost on the River. Obviously, we don't get to hear how Dylan might have recorded these songs because he never recorded them. The music was all up to the New Basement tapes. All we have are the words. Thankfully, that says an awful lot. Referring to unreleased New Basement tapes track When Matthew Met Mary, Elvis said, quote, "One of them has a line that goes, 1,000 doors couldn't hold me back from you." If you wrote a line like that, you wouldn't keep it in a drawer for 47 years. Unless you were Bob Dylan. Sure, these are throwaways, but considering who they came from, they're pretty good throwaways. It's unfair to compare this stuff to the legend of Dylan, but what we can compare it to is the original Basement tapes. The real thing, not the mythology. The Basement tapes were 6 guys, one of whom happened to be one of the biggest rock and roll stars to ever live, just shooting this shit completely without pretenses. No one was afraid of fucking up because no one was gonna hear this stuff anyway, right? Do you really fuck up if there's no one there to hear it? The New Basement tapes, on the other hand, were recorded and arranged with an audience in mind. These are songs that will be put on an album for mass release, just like music from Big Pink. Where the Basement tapes and the New Basement tapes overlap is how the songs came to be. Both Dylan and the band and the New Basement tapes kind of fumbled their way through stuff they didn't have a fully formed vision for. Sometimes the songs didn't exist until they were being played through. There's this delightfully chaotic scene in the Lost Songs documentary where Elvis is leading the group through his version of the song Florida Key. There's like 5 million chords. This is Elvis Costello, of course there are, and no one really knows what's going on, not even Elvis, but he sure is confident about it. Though the energy of the creating was different, they share the spirit of collaborative creation. You got me? As we go track by track through Lost on the River, think of it as Dylan writing the screenplay and nothing else. T-Bone was producer, and the New Basement Tapes are the directors. Typically, an album's opening track is its thesis statement. Abbey Road has come together, Disraeli Gears has Strange Brew, In the Court of the Crimson King has 21st Century Schizoid Man. Lost on the River begins with Jim James's first song, Down on the Bottom. According to T-Bone's commentary track that came out with this album, this was the first song recorded. Rhiannon's flight hadn't gotten in yet. You might not pin lyrics like, down to the last drop in the cup, down on the bottom, no place to go but up as screaming Dylan. The connection here is Jim's voice. At certain points, he gets to sounding like Dylan in that weird 1969-1970 period where he was trying to imitate Rick Danko. Interestingly, Dylan seems to have evolved this lyric a few years down the line. Now everything's a little upside down. As a matter of fact, the wheels have stopped. What's good is bad, what's bad is good. You'll find out when you reach the top, you're on the bottom. This production style is super reverby. Jim and Elvis's guitars, the vocals, the tambourine, the bass drum. And Lost on the River has a lot of doubling drums. Almost every single song has two drummers on it. If I heard this at a restaurant where they sell truffle fries in a little metal cup, I wouldn't immediately clock this as being Dylan. Down on the Bottom does just enough to tie Lost on the River to the Dylan canon without making it obvious. For these reasons, Down on the Bottom is a fitting opening track to Lost on the River. We have that sense of security still, but it's clear we're hearing something new. Track 2 of side 1 is Elvis Costello's first contribution to the record, Married to My Hack. Hack started as a slang term for a sex worker, but it evolved into an insult you hurl at journalists. Much more relevant interpretation when you think about what was going on in Dylan's life in 1966. Elvis's speak-sing vocals are reminiscent of a 1966 Dylan. It's appropriate for how weird these lyrics are. I got 15 women and all of them swimming. Or a 12-wheel drive and an oversized hive. Yeah, there's a lot of words to get through, and the heavy reverb isn't helping. It slows the words down by a hair, if that makes any sense. But this isn't sluggish by any means. Elvis saunters his way through the nonsense poetry in 2 minutes flat, while Rhiannon ad-libs and mimics a wah-wah guitar. This album is not going to be 20 tracks of IPA rock. Married to My Hack brings the attitude. Speaking of IPA rock, right, I'm an elder Zoomer. I remember the days you could not escape Mumford & Sons no matter how hard you tried. Every coffee shop, every, we're just two guys with a crazy dream, mediocre burger joint, every department store, Mumford & Sons wore out their welcome fast over here. Marcus Mumford is the Bruce Springsteen of New Americana. He's stadium rockified folk, and he can write an anthem. When everything is anthemic, it starts to feel insincere. The strict deadline on this project got Marcus writing more in 2 weeks than he typically wrote in 6 months. Pressure makes diamonds, and I think that applies to his Lost on the River contributions. Kansas City is more or less a typical Marcus song, but it's the only one here. That, A, gives us some more stylistic variety to listen to, and B, makes Kansas City sincere. If Kansas City is a Marcus anthem, though, we need all hands on deck. Whether that's a comical amount of mandolins or all the manpower in the studio. Haim can be faintly heard on the backing vocals. Taylor played piano. Jay steps back in on drums. Elvis overdubbed Mellotron and sent Johnny Depp in his place to play guitar. This was the radio hit of the album, I See Why. Of all the 20-something choruses presented by all 5 songwriters on Lost on the River, this is the one that sticks. I love you, dear, but just how long can I keep singing that same old song? That's Bob speaking to the audience. He didn't want to sing Blowin' in the Wind for the rest of his life then, and he doesn't want to sing Like a Rolling Stone for the rest of his life now. You called me to come, and then I do, then you say you've made some mistake. You invite me into your house, then you say, you gotta pay for what you break. This is that testy relationship Dylan's always had with his fans, his peers, the media, the music industry. Rhiannon's first contribution to Lost on the River is Spanish Mary. She was especially in touch with the muse, it seems. That's what made her a perfect fit for this project, as did being a relative newbie to the Dylan canon. Quote, I kind of figured instead of going and doing a lot of research, everybody else on this project probably knows of this stuff and has heard of this stuff, meaning the original Basement tapes. Quote, maybe I could be a voice that's coming from kind of left field. That outside perspective keeps things fresh, with her contributions especially. She wasn't trying to imitate any Dylan era, subconscious or not. Spanish Mary is more dramatic than the Bard would dare. Banjo, goosebump-inducing guitar, booming drums. Taylor is one hell of a bassist. Listen to what he plays. Pay attention to how he moves the mood. And Rhiannon's voice does things that most mortals can't. It's nimble on the melody. Listen to how she employs dynamics through With Cargo They Did Carry, and vibrato to accentuate one of the best lyrics on the whole record. Beggar man, tell me no lie. Is it a mystery to live, or is it a mystery to die? Elvis's guitar leads the instrumental refrain, a restrained, foreboding freakout. When you consider what period of Dylan's career this song came from, Spanish Mary introduces the trope of the exotic woman, which I totally think of being a Desire-era thing. Isis, oh Isis, you mystical child, what drives me to you is what drives me insane. Spanish Mary is basically that. She's like a Helen of Troy of sorts. Side 1 closes with Liberty Street, Taylor's version. I'm sorry, I couldn't help myself. It's the hat! With Larkin Poe on backing vocals. It's got a very end of the TV show feel. It's piano-driven. Taylor's Lost on the River song set an awful lot of lyrics to an awful lot of melody. Now look here, baby Snooks, doesn't matter what books you keep underneath your seat is almost a Billy Joel slant. Keep all this in mind for when we talk about Elvis's Liberty Street in a couple sides. The first song on side 2 is Jim's Nothing to It. This was the first of the 8 straggling songs that showed up a couple days before recording began. This is everything I love about the late 2000s indie pop boom. I have no idea how the millennials felt so secure in what they had and their future. I honestly kind of envy them for that. The lyrics go along with that spirit. I knew I was young enough, and I knew there was nothing to it, because I'd already seen it done enough. It strolls along happy and optimistic with plenty of Jim and Rhiannon singing in unison. All together now. Golden Tom and Silver Judas is the first totally acoustic number on the album. It was recorded in the B studio, which wasn't much more than a break room. Golden Tom is a sliver of what I loved about the original Basement tapes. It's spontaneous, undone, just a guitar and some musicians huddled around a microphone. They've nailed their harmonies, but they're missing their entrances. It's so authentic. And I love a good Dylan love song. What can I say? Buffalo Bill wouldn't have known what to do if he got just one look, just one good look at you. And I don't know what to do either, just want to tell you it's neither. Tom said don't take her, Judas said leave her. Both guys, Golden Tom and Silver Judas, told him to walk away in different terms, but he did neither. The romance continues with When I Get My Hands on You, co-written by Marcus and Taylor. And Bob, of course. Both of these guys would have related to this song. Marcus just married his wife, Carrie Mulligan, and Taylor would have just met his future wife, Mandy Moore. When I Set My Eyes on You, Gonna Keep You Out of Town at Night, really reminds me of The Man in Me and the New Morning era, or maybe a little bit of Nashville Skyline. Marcus has set this to totally unanthemic music. Rhiannon plays this repetitive, beautiful plucked motif on fiddle. She makes this total wedding song material, where so much of this music is marked by the time from which it came, Sometimes there's a charm about that. This is an utterly timeless song on Lost on the River. I'm gonna be honest, I don't really love Duncan and Jimmy. It's one of my least favorite contributions of Rhiannon's, though it's closest in line to what she does outside of the new Basement tapes. She is a folk and bluegrass artist, and this is very much in that vein. The last song on disc 1 is Taylor's Florida Key, another utterly timeless contribution thanks to him. The intricacies of the guitar part are totally 1963 and 64 Dylan, those sad romantic songs like Boots of Spanish Leather. But I wish this song was left alone. I don't think it needs the fiddle or anything else really, but that's because I heard the acoustic version in the Lost Songs documentary and I got attached to it. Taylor's interpretation of these lyrics tell a sad tale of a lover gone with the wind. The narrator wanders lost until escaping out to the water. My only darling is gone, took everything and put it out on the lawn, and Jim came and got it and gave it to John. This is a beautiful set of lyrics with vignettes like sunshine in my beer and boys and girls riding on silver goats. It's like if Visions of Johanna took place on a hot weekend afternoon in Florida instead of a blizzard in New York City. But I have to say, the line, "It's getting harder and harder to be me," that gave me a laugh. Disc 2 opens with Jim's Heidi Heidi Ho. It's something of a crossover event. Bill Coster of Jim's band My Morning Jacket plays piano, while Taylor's brother and Dawes bandmate Griffin fills in on drums. I can tell exactly which artists were profoundly influenced by Dylan, the original Basement Tapes era especially. Holy hell, does Jim sound like a Dylan offshoot here? That singing style comes from the back of the throat. Jim plays the mellotron for like half the album, but this is the first time I've actually heard it. There's not a whole lot going on in the lyrics. Heidi Heidi Ho, making love wherever we go. Kind of a why don't we do it in the road situation. So the arrangement gets to shine. Summery mellotron chords, woozy guitar, fiddle, and an extended intimate piano solo. Next is Elvis's Lost on the River. This was one of 4 versions written, only 2 made the cut for the album. Now this is one I would love to see Dylan's lyric sheet for because according to T-Bone, Elvis wrote a new lyric for this. But comparing this version to Rhiannon's at the end of the album, they both have verses that the other don't have. Looking at the lyrics, they do share. I got lost on the river, but I got found. This links Lost on the River to Dylan's growing interest in Christianity. Characters from the Bible, themes of salvation show up on the original Basement Tapes, John Wesley Harding, and the songs Dylan contributed to music from Big Pink. This isn't one of my personal highlights of the album, which is kind of sorry to say because it's the title track, but this is one of my favorite Elvis vocal performances here. It's fragile, soulful, and sincere. I've been flip-flopping on Stranger for a week. On the one hand, love how the music is played. Great guitar playing by Marcus and Taylor. Their guitar tones have a great 70s highway tune feel. I love when the tone on Lost on the River has a bit of an edge. The coda especially gives this song dimension. That's contrasted by Rhiannon's fiddle. I swear to God, someone better build her a time machine so she can go back and play on the Rolling Thunder Revue. And the lyrics. Wow. This feels like Tangled Up in Blue's older cousin, where instead of the fruitless Odysseus journey to get back to his long-lost lover, our narrator's trying to run from her memory. But on the other hand, this feels a little bit Mumford & Sons formulaic. I'm not supposed to like this. Sue me. Second to last on side 3 is Taylor's Card Shark. This might be Taylor's weakest contribution to the album. This is a funny set of lyrics, but it isn't a phenomenal one. You can make a good film out of a good edit, but you can't make a great film out of okay footage. The vocals are really the high point, and there's wonderful moments in the melody Taylor's written, like that "Get Him in the Nose, it blooms like a vine towards the sun." About the last song on side 3, Quick Like a Flash, T-Bone said, quote, "It felt like what Capitol Studios was made for. It's super cool. Quick like a flash." Flash. Overall, it feels very modern. It builds across 3 minutes, doesn't waste a second of runtime. Jim's rougher around the edges vocals shine, and this is another unreasonably good bass line by Taylor. Quick Like a Flash is a pair of jeans with 10 sets of pockets, and Taylor's found them all. Opening up side 4 is Elvis and Rhiannon's interpretation of Heidi Heidi Ho. This arrangement is entirely mismatched to the lyrics. I won't spend much time on this one either. Next is Diamond Ring, another Taylor number which is similarly sweet like Florida Key. It's pleasant, wholesome, and cozy. An awful lot of songs about gold, silver, weddings, and rings are on this album, reflective of Dylan's settling into married life with Sarah. The Whistle is Blowing is another classic Dylan trope, bidding fare thee well as you send a woman away. Marcus's delivery does justice to the track. It's tender, but you can hear the nod and the wink. With the rumbling drums breaking into a spark at the end of the roll and barroom closing feel group vocals, I feel this could have been a worthy contender for the closing track. Now we've finally gotten to Elvis's interpretation of Liberty Street, and it's completely different. He takes that exact set of lyrics and puts it to a mid-tempo rocker with like 5 million chords and a waltz section.
And then there's a
Waltz section.
You're gonna love it.
Waltz section.
I know, it sounds crazy.
I love it.
Ultimately, I feel 6 Months doesn't have the heart that Taylor's Liberty Street does, but it's a good second from closer. Elvis wrote in a line shout for everyone, like a curtain call of the new Basement Tapes production. In the Lost Songs documentary, we see T-Bone guiding sessions, but his gentle nudge towards Duncan and Jimmy was nearly the death of this album's closing track, Rhiannon's Lost on the River reprise. If not for Marcus advocating for it, it might never have been brought to fruition. Duncan and Jimmy would have been Lost on the River's Hollywood ending, but that spirit just isn't authentic to the source material. The whole point of Dylan retreating to Woodstock was to escape the Hollywood rock and roll fame machine. The Lost on the River reprise is authentic to the Basement Tapes history. Everyone sat on couches, huddled around one mic. Rhiannon's voice is haunting and dramatic in her lower register, lonely like a woman wandering the woods in a long black veil. She paints in ink with her voice, dipped in water for the grays and the waves, rich and strong black to render the sticks. She sings, I got lost on the river, but I got found, but with how the women sing like wind through the trees, very southern gothic, I imagine this narrator has passed on and found solace in the afterlife. While about half of Rhiannon's songs are just not my cup of tea, it's her I'm left thinking about. And I think that's because she was the only artist who went in with no preconceived notions. Her fiddle playing is integral to the album's atmosphere. Her voice is incredible. Her best songs are haunting. When I played this album for my mom last weekend, Spanish Mary came on and she asked, "Who's this singing?" I'm bummed Rhiannon never really got to capitalize on the clout that came from working on a project with Dylan's name on it. Her band, the Carolina Chocolate Drops, would have just been breaking up when the new Basement Tapes was recorded and released. Talk about timing. She just released a mostly instrumental album a couple weeks ago and contributed to the Sinners soundtrack. If you like old school folk and bluegrass, even the Muscle Shoals soul sound, she did a whole album in that style. Check out her stuff. So, does the new Basement Tapes live up to the Basement Tapes hype? Of course not. It's impossible to live up to the legend of the Basement Tapes. People silently hoped for a long-lost sister of This Wheel's on Fire, I Shall Be Released, or All Along the Watchtower to be tucked away in that box. But with the complete Basement Tapes official release just a week before Lost on the River's release, it became apparent that this wasn't going to be the case. Instead, the new Basement Tapes did something that rarely happens in rock and roll history. It took the history of the original Basement Tapes and extended it to the fans, getting 4 guys and 1 great broad who never would have crossed paths otherwise into a room together with one of Dylan's finest sidemen behind the board with a great bunch of material to play with. That's a concept I'm a diehard fan of. While it misses the casual element, it captures the experimental and ephemeral of the Basement Tapes perfectly, which is arguably harder to do. Lost on the River doesn't rewrite history. It doesn't write a Hollywood sequel or tie up all the loose ends. Instead, it presented a mystery diehard Dylan fans didn't even know needed solving. It helps us answer the question of what makes Bob Dylan in one fine footnote. My personal favorites off this one are Down on the Bottom, Married to My Hack, Kansas City, Spanish Mary, Nothing to It, When I Get My Hands on You, and Lost on the River 20. Remember, if you want to keep up with all of my favorites from all the Vinyl Mondays and all the Modern Classics Month installments, I have a Spotify playlist linked in my description. I update it every week. And that's it! That's part 1 of year 3 of Modern Classics Month. That was Lost on the River. What do you think of this album? What do you think of the new Basement Tapes? What do you think of the original Basement Tapes? Leave a comment letting me know. I love hearing what you guys have to say about albums that I love, and remember, despite what some guy on the internet says, your opinion matters. The new Basement Tapes was a pretty perfect transition from music from Big Pink into Modern Classics Month. All signs aren't just pointing to a Basement Tapes redux. They're like glowing neon and flashing bulbs. There's probably a wacky waving inflatable arm flailing tube man somewhere in there too. Consider that filed into my queue. If you like what I do here, you should like this video and subscribe to my channel. I post new episodes of my flagship series, Vinyl Monday, Mondays at 11, wouldn't you know it? A new episode of my podcast, The Dolls Pod, every other Friday at noon. A new episode of that just went up. This installment is all about fashion icon and one of my co-host Emma's greatest muses, Jane Birkin. That's available wherever you stream your podcast, but as always, Apple and Spotify are linked in the description. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next week. Bye!